Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Evangelicals have been believing that about the mainstream media for a very long time. So the more the mainstream media piles on Donald Trump and they consider Stormy Daniels part of the pile on, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
That needle's not moving at all,
well,
Chris.
Okay, but there's one issue, right, where you can say, well, these are a group of people who just do not trust what they hear. But here's what I found really interesting. This is white evangelicals being polled on this. Do you believe Trump or the women? Okay? 40% say the women, 36% say Trump, 24% are sure. A plurality actually believe the women. So the issue here isn't they're saying this is fake. They're saying, yeah, I believe this happened. I do not care.
Yeah, but Chris, here's the thing. They believed some of all those other stories, too, back from the 80s and the 90s. And look, Donald Trump got into this race and everybody knew this just in. He's not a Boy Scout. And they understood that. They voted for him anyhow. Now, there's a lot of reasons as to why. We can get into all of that. But the bottom line is they've seen this culture go to you-know-what in a handbasket. And they say, you know what, enough of that. They also feel they're being played by the Republican Party. And they said, you know what, we're going to go for this guy. We're going to give this guy a shot.
Well, see, so from a purely pragmatic perspective, I get that, right? There are two political coalitions in American life. He's on my team. He represents my coalition. He empowers it. I don't care what he does in his personal life. I'm going with him. But if that's true, does that at least sort of retroactively apply where we're not going to see evangelicals make a big deal out of, you know, the private behavior of politicians, Democrats they don't like? Do they regret everything they said about Bill Clinton when they were just basically marching on Washington to get the guy run out of town because of his dastardly private deeds?
Legitimate question, Chris. Look, they believe in the grace principle, and, you know, they understand that we're all in need of God's forgiveness. We're all sinners. And so, you know, where does grace run out? Well, here's the good news. Grace doesn't run out with Jesus Christ at all. Now, it might run out. Well, hang on, Chris. It might run out with liberals or conservatives or you or me, but not God.
I've read my Bible and I grew up in the church. And grace doesn't come cheap, and you got to ask for it, and you got to ask for forgiveness, and you have to be pious, and you have to pray to your Lord God and Savior, and you have to ask for it. You have to have a change of heart. You have to reach out spiritually. Is there a single person on God's great earth who believes that Donald Trump is doing that?
Well, I can tell you this. I interviewed him, and you can Google it, Chris. I interviewed him in 2015, in September of 2015, and he said he does ask God for forgiveness. He talked about that. Now, look, that's his word. I mean, I'm not God.
He also talked about when you asked him what God means to him, he talked about how great his golf course is that he didn't have a mortgage on.
Yeah, look, the bottom line is this, Chris. Evangelicals and Donald Trump see the world very much in absolutes. Good versus evil, right and wrong, all of that. And I'm telling you, and maybe it's a Dr. Phil experiment at some point, but I'm telling you what's going on. They both are bold in their views, and they've also Chris, they've also been criticized for those views, and you put it all together, and they feel a kinship between themselves. I get. A set of absolute beliefs and being in the bunker with him. I think that is actually quite descriptive. But here's a question. Is there a breaking point? Is there a revelation that could come out about Donald Trump, about his private behavior, about his public behavior, about anything he did? Roy Moore, we saw this put to the test with Roy Moore. This is a person credibly accused of molesting children who still won, 80% of white evangelicals in Alabama. Is there something
that Donald Trump could do to lose that support? Or is it just the case that he could literally do anything?
Chris, Bill Clinton had a Monica Lewinsky. Right now, we don't see a Monica Lewinsky, Donald Trump White House. If that happened, Chris, game, set, match, it's over for Donald Trump with evangelicals. Now, you say why?
Wait a second. You really think that? Okay.
Oh, well, let me explain. When I say game, set, match, remember, he won 81% of the evangelical vote, the ones that showed up, 81%.
White
He's not going to get, he will not get 81%. And if he doesn't get 81%, it's game, set, match for him. So that's important to point out. And you might ask, well, why in the world does that matter compared to 12 years ago? Because evangelicals at that point, just like any constituency, would feel played at that point. He's promoting Judeo-Christian values, but then doing something, against that right in the here and now. That would be a real issue for them. But once again, we don't see that. And in the book, I can tell you that he has so many evangelicals around him right now from a spiritual perspective that the sense is, from our reporting over 100 interviews, he is indeed on a spiritual journey that has evolved in the last few years. Remember, Chris, you're talking about 10, 12 years ago. We haven't seen anything in the last few years. That's what the book shows.
I guess the Lord works in mysterious ways if he is, in fact, on a spiritual journey. David Brody, thanks for being with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
It is Wednesday, the 28th of March of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, apropos for David Brody, Christian Broadcasting Network flack David Brody, to mix it up with Chris Hayes on the true meaning of our temporal existence in this spiritual plane. Yeah, like he really knows any of that. Well, hypocrites got a hypocrite. And yes, I truly believe he was unaware of how he was exposing white evangelicals for the hypocrites they are. I was sort of riffing on this on social media, and of course I got attacked by the usual, just join Twitter bots, trolls, that not all white evangelicals. Okay. All right. I don't know. Do they really think that we're that stupid? And maybe that's why, when the Cultural Revolution comes, anybody wearing eyeglasses is going to be put out in the fields chipping rock. We still have Mueller so far as I can tell. Once I'm like really focused in on the curated news that I will prepare, I really shut the world off somewhat. So as far as I know, Mueller has not been fired, but boy, was there some mobilization in Congress and in the Senate. House Intelligence Committee members sent a letter to the DOJ. Some senators did as well, imploring the 5 next in succession after Rosenstein, or is it Rosenstein, pleading with them, protect Mueller, do not resign, don't quit, don't fire. And that's thrown up a lot of flags, like, what the hell is going on? And we know what's going on because Rick Gates and others in the campaign, and probably through the transition into actually sitting in the presidency, was in, close communication with a Russian intelligence officer. Oh, I know, they say former, but really, are you ever really a former Russian intelligence officer? Don't they take an omerta oath? Look what happens in England. I mean, they get poisoned and they get hung and they get all sorts of convenient ways of, moving on into the next spiritual plane. Well, what's on the rest of the menu today? Well, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, we'll look into a neo-Nazi gang that was busted after discussing a murder cover-up while they had 911 on the phone. Yeah, okay. California slams the White House in its lawsuit over the illegal citizenship census question. That's big news, isn't it? And then finishing up in the Bistro Cafe, the captain and operations officer of an NGO rescue ship face 15 years in prison for saving drowning Libyan refugees in the Mediterranean. Because, what we do to the least of these. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the utterly nonsensical way NFL cheerleaders must live their lives comes out in a discrimination lawsuit. And the ghost of Pete Petersen will haunt us for many years to come. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. I shouldn't have to remind you to go to the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com, and you'll notice the chat room link on the rightish of the page, and you'll notice the contribute donate buttons on the leftish of the page. And, indeed, thank you for your generosity. That's how we pay our bills, and we are unable to do this without you, truly. And if you have concerns, questions, requests, etc., you can contact us on that chat room link that Kelly Lincoln monitors. And join us and follow us on Twitter at Netroots Radio on Twitter. And we have a Facebook presence as well. And follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And also post those show notes and links in Daily Coast Diary. And I'm there, of course, as Justice Putnam, my real name. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, yay, TuneIn, and etc. And I don't want to fail to mention that music is provided for the show by Frances Livings, and she's that wonderful ingenue that I always mention, living down in Southern California, and performs all over the Southland, and quite often during the week, and most every weekend. So check her out. And there are links to her work so that you can peruse and purchase. Please do. Thank you. Okay, so first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is from the Daily Beast. Oh my God. Yes, I will pull stories from the Daily Beast. Please. Kelly Weil penned this. A white supremacist gang that rewards members for murder is in turmoil after its members killed one of their own at a house party. Jeez. The Department of Justice last week unsealed an indictment against 8 members of the Aryan Circle, the gang, whose members wear neo-Nazi imagery, ran a murderous extortion ring across the southern United States. But when the group allegedly botched the cover-up of a house party murder, federal authorities closed in. The Aryan Circle was celebrating Independence Day on July 1st when members threw a party in Evangeline Parish, Louisiana. And that was first reported by the Anti-Defamation League. The white supremacist group demands absolute loyalty and lifetime commitment from its members, who must be unanimously approved into the organization. But despite their shared love of swastikas, the Aryan Circle members still found themselves arguing at the July party. July 1st. That must be from original intent. Okay. Soon, okay, they had this big argument. All right, I like this. Soon, one participant, Clifton Hallmark, found himself clinging to life after Aryan Circle member Jeremy Jordan shot him in the head. Nice. So the guy who was shot in the head, his wife and another woman took him to a nearby gas station where they called 911. But police were suspicious before they arrived on the scene. Hallmark's wife and the other woman are both Aryan Circle members and tried covering for the group even as Hallmark blot out. Now that's loyalty to the group. I don't know. Maybe he was just the guy that she was married to. Okay. So, of course, they tried claiming Hallmark was shot during a gas station robbery and, man, it was some black guy. It's always some black guy. But what they didn't know is that they accidentally discussed the cover-up while they were on the phone with the police. Okay. Well, I don't know. I got to tell you, there must have been some sort of chromosomal deviation when the master race arose out of the primordial soup. Police heard a woman tell Hallmark's wife in the background of the 911 call, "We're going to tell them he got robbed, okay?" When police arrived at the gas station, they found no blood or bullet casings in the store. Surveillance footage revealed the Aryan Circle members had arrived in a van and immediately called police rather than being robbed as they claimed. When police confronted her, Hallmark's wife reportedly blamed the discrepancies on drugs and lack of sleep. Well, of course. Your husband gets shot in the head, you drive him to a gas station, and I don't know, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Oh, he was robbed. And blaming I was just really tired, and I those antihistamines, boy, they really make me a loopy. The shooting got investigators' attention. But, as always, the cover-up might bring down the group. The indictment unsealed last week accuses Jordan of using a firearm in a crime resulting in death, and several Aryan Circle members of accessory after the fact for the murder. The accessory to murder investigation also exposed the Aryan Circle's inner workings. The group is an offshoot of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas and has spread from Texas into Louisiana and Missouri. Originally a prison-based gang, the Aryan Circle has developed a militaristic structure complete with a 5-person upper board and middle managers who direct the gang's operations. Now, you always know the middle managers are always the most bored, and they only want to get their 2-week vacation. The indictment also describes a racketeering scheme in which the Aryan Circle sold drugs and guns across state lines. Because they have a God-given Second Amendment right, goddammit. The group threatened, assaulted, and even murdered people who stood in their path and awarded specialized tattoos for different crimes. And those tattoos included swastikas and Nazi SS lightning bolts and other iconography. Jordan, who is accused of firing the fatal shot, has pleaded guilty to violent crimes in the aid of racketeering and using a firearm in a crime resulting in death. And I guess when he gets to prison, he's going to be promoted to sergeant. You would expect that the masterminds of the master race who are attempting to deconstruct the administrative state would have the intelligence to foresee that they would probably be obstructed by the rule of law in their attempt to deconstruct the administrative state. And it may be true that they are prepared, But a lot of lawsuits came down on this census citizenship question, and California has one of the biggest. They filed a big-time lawsuit of what they deem a deficient census, which is exactly what Trump is attempting to do. He's weaponizing aspects of the administrative state to destroy itself. At least that's what the masterminds of the master race think is going to happen. But we'll see, won't we? This is by E.A. Crunden from Think Progress. California Attorney General Xavier Becerra announced the suit shortly after the Commerce Department agreed to the question's addition, pushed by the Department of Justice. You know, it's rich. Jeff Sessions saying they're doing it just to protect people in the Voting Rights Act when he's worked his whole public life to destroy anything of equality and voting, and please. Okay, so the question was last asked in 1950, and the press secretary lied in the press room in the White House, saying it's been used every census since 1965, and it was stopped when that evil Kenyan Muslim became president in 2010. It was a lie. California maintains that the question is unconstitutional, including a citizenship question on the 2020 census is not just a bad idea, it is illegal, Xavier Becerra said. Under the Constitution, actual enumeration is required every 10 years in the United States in order to allocate seats in Congress. That allotment is based on the number of free persons, something California's lawsuit says a citizenship question would violate. It says persons, it doesn't say citizens. And I've heard this argument every time because people who have no idea about civics, they carry the Constitution in their front pocket over their heart like it's some sort of Bible that they revere, but they have no idea what it means. And there's people who consider themselves to be constitutional scholars while, rubbing their beer bellies, who had no idea that the census was even part of the Constitution. I keep reminding people, post office, census. No. Opponents of the citizenship question more broadly say it is unnecessary and will inevitably spark a inaccurate count. Well, that's a feature, not a bug. If you undercount and a region is underrepresented, they don't have not only the proper representation in Congress, but appropriations for funds, whether it be to fill a pothole or, pay a cop. And why is that happening? It's because California is a sanctuary state and Jeff Sessions is a racist bigot who ought to be in jail for perjury a number of times. Finishing up here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And I should add, just in time for Easter. And And this story is right up the alley for a little Easter cheer. Yes. This is from the Euro Observer. And it's Nicolaj Nielsen penned this. Gerard Canals, operation officer at the NGO Proactiva Open Arms, is not afraid of jail. Earlier this month, the NGO helped save more than 200 people from drowning in the central Mediterranean. I may go to prison, but I'm not really worried because we did nothing wrong. Canals, along with the captain of the NGO rescue ship as well as the head of the mission, face 15-year prison sentences and millions of euros in fines for their actions, according to the NGO. The chief prosecutor of Catania, Carmelo Zuccaro, has accused them of trafficking for having refused to hand people rescued over to the Libyans. The Spanish boat had plucked the people, including children, some 73 nautical miles off the Libyan coast, well outside of Libyan territorial waters, after receiving a rescue distress signal from the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in Rome. The NGO was then instructed to hand them over to the Libyan Coast Guard, but when the boat showed up, people refused to board the Libyan vessel. Canal said the two sides had argued for some 3 hours before the Libyans instructed them to take the migrants back to Italy. So one way or another, we did what we were supposed to do, Canal said. It is the first time the NGO was told to hand over the migrants to the Libyans. The NGO was fearful of possible illegal pushbacks to Libya, given the rescue was well beyond Libyan territorial waters. The principle of non-refoulement means refugees and migrants cannot be forced back to a place they are fleeing from. Imagine that. Now, Canals was not on the boat during the rescue operation, has yet to receive any formal charges from the Italian prosecutor. It may never happen if they don't communicate to us in a couple of days, he said. The NGO has, however, handed over all materials, images, and data to Italian authorities. But the implications and broader message is clear. NGO rescue boats are not welcome in the central Mediterranean. The boats appeared shortly after Italy had ended its Mare Nostrum naval search and rescue operation. In 2016, there were 11 NGO vessels operating rescues. Last year, it dropped to 9 following Italian imposed code of conduct rules on NGOs. And today, there is only one run by Doctors Without Borders. The crackdown appears to have helped curb departure departure numbers from Libya itself. Most people are looking towards Tunisia, which now represents 20% of departures. It is unclear why the Libyan Coast Guard was operating so far from its territorial waters last year. The Italians hailed Libyan efforts to designate a search and rescue zone, but the International Maritime Organization, a UN agency which oversees the zones, says it has received no notification from the Libyans. So far, Libya has not provided any information to our global SAR plan database. But the issue is important. NGO Proactiva Open Arms President Oscar Camps remains perplexed on what the Libyan boat was doing so far out at sea. If they don't have a search and rescue area recognized in operation, under which grounds is the Libyan Coast Guard operating at a distance of 73 miles from the coast? Let's remember, usually it's 12 miles. Some people push it to 28. It includes setting up, the EU has promised over $46 million to help the Libyan Coast Guard in their rescue operations in a manner fully compliant with international human rights obligations. It includes setting up operational rooms in Tripoli and would supply them with rescue equipment, rubber boats, and communications, and train Libyan guards to do all of that. And the European Commission last week defended the Italian Code of Conduct Pact. It also said that the Libyans were working within their territorial waters. According to the Italian Coast Guard, they were working within their territorial waters, and we have nothing to add at the moment, an EU Commission spokesperson said. Well, isn't that nice? Happy Easter. Yeah. Okay, well, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, updated John Hughes. If you think about the flavor of his movies, especially the ones from the 80s, and add some diversity, you have the basic vibe for the new romantic comedy Love, Simon. About the first line from Nick Robertson, who plays Simon, is, "I'm just like everyone else, except for one big-ass secret." From there, the stage is set to see how the lovable Simon is going to negotiate his inevitable coming out. He's joined in the struggle by an anonymous email friend, pseudonymed Blue, who is apparently a classmate at his upper-middle-class suburban high school and is apparently negotiating the same issue. Simon also has understanding friends and liberal parents who skate kind of close to caricature. All isn't totally well, however, as Simon does have to contend with the slightly off Martin from drama class, who gets wind of the Blue communications when Simon forgets to sign out from a computer in the school library. Martin blackmails Simon to enlist his assistance in fixing him up with Simon's longtime female friend, Abby. While Simon cooperates, Martin is unsatisfied with the results and releases the emails anyway. Everything here is measured, and as a rom-com, we know it's not going to step off a ledge into another kind of movie. Simon's dad can't be an abusive drunk, and we know Simon's not going to pull a knife on Martin. There is measured suspense, though. Will Simon find his Blue? The search for suspects actually provides for some of the film's best comic moments. It's probably worth knowing that director Greg Berlanti was himself a closeted high schooler in the Ferris Bueller era, and it must be freeing for him that in 2018, a gay couple, like one seated near this reviewer, can sit and eat popcorn in front of a screen showing a movie like Love, Simon, and even more freeing that the whole audience can enjoy it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is 60-Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. From his first year in the Virginia legislature in 1776, James Madison was an advocate of religious freedom. In colonial Virginia, the Anglican or Episcopal Church was established by law as the official religion and received public funding. Madison became convinced such favoritism was wrong because it discriminated against Baptists and other religions in Virginia. Madison believed that allowing a diversity of faiths to exist together on an equal footing was the best assurance against religious persecution and strife. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Englehart. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60-Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Testifying by police. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. A stubborn problem, the recent New York Times headline continued. And then the subhead, police lying persists even amid an explosion of video evidence that has allowed the public to test officers' credibility. Examples in the article. An officer accuses a driver of recklessly crossing the double yellow line, which it turns out the road doesn't have at all. And an officer claims that a man came at him with clenched fists, but that never occurred. And an officer claims to have witnessed an arrest when the evidence shows he wasn't even there. The article quotes one officer who said, quote, behind closed doors, we call it testifying. Sometimes to solve a crime that they couldn't solve. Sometimes to justify an unconstitutional search and seizure. Sometimes to simply send someone to prison. Police officials in New York have expressed optimism that cell phone cameras, which are everywhere, would reduce police lying, But it turns out maybe it really hasn't, because as a 10-year Brooklyn officer admitted, there's no real fear of being caught. You're not going to trial. No one's going to be cross-examined, which it turns out is the truth. Maybe 1% of cases actually go to a jury trial or have a motion to suppress. So the odds of an officer being called to account, they're tiny. As the article concludes, quote, video seems to be more capable of exposing lies than in vanquishing them. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Tuesday, March 27, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger.
We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the urgency of now in this unfolding conundrum of life and history. There is such a thing as being too late.
That is Philip Jennings, the General Secretary of Uni Global Union. In an address at Cornell University in the United States, he warned that the world is in dangerous times because of the possibility of nuclear war, the rise of right-wing populism, and changes to work because of digitization. He began his comments with a description of Uni Global Union.
We are a global union organization. We have members in 150 nations. We are spread throughout the services industry. We are the #1 global union in terms of the reach that we have. We are present in Africa, Asia, the Americas, and of course in Europe. We do our research, we do our human rights work, we do our negotiating work, we do our solidarity work, we do our thinking work. And then we're also, as an organization, believe in the action and getting things done and making things happen. What are we trying to do here? What is it that we're trying to do as a global union and a global movement? We're trying to put work back in the center of the conversation. Because our friends on the left, Democrats and Labour parties, they forgot the world of work and what the reality was for working men and women. So starting 5 years ago, we began our own project as a small, I was laughed at. What are you doing, Future World of Work, Philip? This is nonsense. This doesn't. So we have a project on the future world of work, and we're convinced. And now it's the fashion everywhere, but nevertheless, we now have a new conversation about work taking place, which has more gravity and weight and attracting political attention than the world of work attracted previously. We're looking at jobs quantity, jobs quality. The OECD now understands at last that there are unacceptable forms of work, and that the quality of work is important, and they now measure what the quality of work is all about. We have to look at the nature of the changes which face us in terms of job quantity, job quality, and above all, transformation. This digital revolution is transformational, and my message is we are not prepared for this degree of transformation, and we are not prepared to accompany people. We're accused of being protectionist and all the rest of it. So I like the word, how are we going to accompany people through this revolution? In terms of their income, in terms of their job, in terms of their retraining, in terms of their requalification, and how you turn education into a lifetime experience. And then, indeed, social protection. Also, we'd like to talk in terms of what a just transition means in terms of mitigation and remediation. We look at new bargaining for unions and where's the new organising opportunities for us? That how can we change the models that we have, that we become more open, maybe more social movement. I'm interested in the worker centres. The union movement started in cities and towns and villages. We didn't start and drop an industrial union from the sky. That came later. So this building has to be done. And then there's new policy work to be done on artificial intelligence. We produced our own guidelines. You can find them on our website. About what does artificial intelligence really mean for our civilization and what is the ethical concerns that we must have. Because another kind of world would be being created, and also data protection as a bargaining item, and also to have some fun with Silicon Valley about antitrust laws, about the degree of ownership that these companies have. We haven't seen ownership of this degree, I think, ever. So I know there's some interesting work going on in academic communities looking at, well, if John Sherman was alive or FDR was alive, what would he be doing about the size of these companies and the influence that they have? And also having a new conversation about data. Is it a public utility or not?
Mr. Jennings' full address is on the UNI website at uniglobalunion.org. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From the United Nations, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Russia warned Tuesday of an imminent response to the expulsion of more than 130 of its diplomats by 24 countries this week. Those countries blame Russia for the attempted assassination of a former Russian spy in the UK last month. Australia is the latest country to kick out Russian officials alleged to be undercover intelligence operatives. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop took things a step further and said punishments could trickle into the realm of sports.
The World Cup is one of the further actions that could be taken in relation to this matter.
Bishop later clarified she meant a state boycott of the Russian World Cup this summer, meaning government officials wouldn't attend as VIPs. If that happens, Australia will join 6 other countries in banning their diplomats from the competition. As for Russia's retaliation, Moscow is likely to order the expulsion of foreign diplomats as well. On Monday, Russia's embassy in Washington even took to Twitter to solicit advice about which American consulate in the country to close. The winner, out of more than 55,000 votes, was the American diplomatic facility in St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city. And while independence seems a faraway dream for those in the Spanish province of Catalonia, that isn't stopping demonstrators from voicing their frustration with the Spanish government as a top independence campaigner languishes in a German jail. Crowds of Catalans took to the street on Tuesday to snarl traffic and draw attention to the plight of Carles Puigdemont, the region's former president who organized an independence vote in October before fleeing the country. Puigdemont was charged with rebellion by Spanish authorities last week and subsequently detained in Germany as courts consider a request for his extradition. In a referendum last year, Catalans overwhelmingly opted for independence on low turnout. Spain's government called the referendum illegal and has since stripped away self-governance powers from Catalonia. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is our especially special daily special. And we always like to begin with weather from around the world, and where we begin with that is along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. It's currently 35 degrees. I thought we were going to be in the low 40s. Come on. And we're going to be a bit warmer today. We were bumping 70 at where the mothership for Netroots Radio is. And so we're going to be about 72, I suppose. And nice spring weather for where I am at in Southern Oregon. I just want the nights not to be so chilly. I can handle the mid to upper 40s. But as you can tell, I'm almost over whatever it is that I caught, because the last vestiges of it is the raspy voice. Yes. Well, it looks like we won't have any rain until next week, though we do have showers forecast for beginning shortly after Easter Sunday. Still no data on air quality, though the winds have been enough to scour the valley, which is always good, and the air to me has tasted and smelled sweet. Currently, it's out of the southwest at negligible 2 miles per hour. It will be picking up and remain coming out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and shifting tonight out of the west. That's still a fair little breezy, 5 to 10 miles per hour. Pressure is rising at 30.4 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and humidity is 97%. So I don't consider that dry, but I don't know. Right now it's 97%. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Oh, let's see. Okay, London is 43 and cloudy. Paris is 51 with a rain shower, and they do have a weather advisory for flooding. Rome is 63 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 38 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 64 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 66 and clear. Tokyo is 63 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 42 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and they planted these personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is a article by Lindsay Gibbs out of Think Progress. It is no secret that NFL cheerleaders are underpaid, undervalued, and held to a ridiculous beauty standard by NFL organizations. But on Sunday, the New York Times published an infuriating report that reveals that some teams exert almost maniacal control over both the public image and personal lives of cheerleaders, all based on toxic, outdated notions of how both men and women should behave. The article tells a story of Bailey Davis, a former New Orleans Saints cheerleader who has filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The main issue at hand involves the restrictions that NFL teams routinely put in place, barring players from fraternizing with their respective teams' cheerleaders. As it turns out, the Saints are so particularly worried about the matter that they put the impetus fully on the cheerleaders to avoid NFL players in all social situations, be it on social media, at a restaurant, at a party, at the mall, going to the gym, going to the store, Girl, if you just didn't look so pretty. Girl, why were you walking out at night? Girl, why were you drinking? Girl, why didn't you? Girl, why didn't you? Girl. Okay. How about this? How about putting the impetus on the guys? If you insist that your team and cheerleader, your football team and your cheerleaders can't fraternize with each other, how about the guys learning a few techniques of avoidance? And that's what this article is about, because all of the impetus is put on the cheerleaders, and if they just happen to be in the same spot. Now, I don't necessarily think it's bad. I mean, I can understand if you're married, you don't want to be fraternizing with your team's cheerleaders. But normally, aren't we talking about adults here? Adults being able to live their lives when they're not on the clock. And I got to tell you, these women get paid less than minimum wage and have to front a lot of costs. It is, it is a violation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's regulations. But in the Trump land, I hate to be a cynic, but I don't think their lawsuit is going to go very far until hopefully after the midterms.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
All right, finishing up here at the chef's table is an article by my good friend R.J. Eskow, writing for Alternet here. Pete Petersen, the billionaire businessman and anti-government crusader, died last week at the age of 91. He leaves behind family and friends who will miss him, and a vast coterie of consultants and politicians who may miss his checks even more. They can take comfort from the words of Percy B. Shelley, "He doth not sleep, he hath awakened from the dream of life." Petersen will be mourned by those who loved him, but that's no reason to forget the harm he has done, especially since his family vows to continue his work. His son, speaking on behalf of the foundation Petersen created, says that we will carry on his legacy with passion and pride. Yeah, well, the legacy is marked by Pete Petersen's long war against Social Security and Medicare, his austerity economics, and the false aura of objectivity Petersen used to promote his ideology. Behind his carefully staged, managed veneer of bipartisanship, his team once tried to get me suspended from a publication for calling him right-wing. That was R.J. Eskow almost got fired, suspended. Petersen engaged in a decades-long war on the social contract. Programs like Social Security and Medicare were his immediate targets, but his ultimate goal was even broader. He wanted to extinguish the ideal of public goods and put an end to the notion that certain social programs should be universal. Petersen took conservative ideas and gave them an undeserved air of truth and neutrality. Politicians who embraced them were more likely to receive a steady flow of high-dollar contributions and gaining entree to the right salons and alliances. Thanks to Petersen, prominent journalists can make outlandish and inaccurate statements about entitlement programs while still laying claim to journalistic objectivity. That's no mean feat on Petersen's part, although it becomes easier when you spend nearly $500 million in 4 years to promote your agenda, as Petersen did. Now, he's been on this crusade for decades, and his total spending is not known. Isn't that nice? Petersen may be gone, but his ideology still holds sways in the corridors of power, political and media. Well, Petersen was a corporate success at a young age. He then joined Richard Nixon's cabinet, but he became a billionaire as co-founder of the Blackstone Group, one of 4 firms that exemplify what The Economist calls the barbarian establishment. As that, and of course The Economist is hardly a left-wing publication, they wrote, the standard operating procedures of private equity, purchasing businesses, adding debt, minimizing taxes, cutting facilities and costs and employment, extracting large fees, are just the sort of things that aggravate popular anger about finance. Wow, The Economist is such a socialist rag now, isn't it? Petersen promptly put his billions to work on a new mission, cutting government programs, especially Medicare and Social Security, and reducing government deficits. Because, listen, if you can't buy stuff at the company store and pay rent in your company town, you don't deserve a job because you're just merely a cog in the machine, and why don't you just die? What is it with these people? You know, this is another part of this prosperity gospel BS. They think because for some reason they got a bunch of money, they know the secret to the universe, and they have a direct line to whatever it is that they perceive as God. I suppose if I wanted to be polite, I'd just call them moral scolds. They know better about how all the rest of us should be. Because look at them, they're such a success. Well, profit a man who would lose his soul over a greenback. Deficits were Petersen's obsession, but when it came to economics, Petersen did the arithmetic, not the math. His zero-sum approach to government budgets failed to recognize the wide range of policy choices that are open to governments or the ways that government spending can create economic growth. He wanted to run government like a business. And look where we are today. Okay? We got a guy in the Oval Office that says, I'm not going after you and ending your life because it's personal. It's just business. Who says that? Yeah, the Don. You can take that on any level of meaning that you want. No cut is too cruel for the Petersen crowd. A Petersen-backed group praised the draconian spending cuts in Donald Trump's proposed budget last year, writing, "The president deserves credit for setting a fiscal goal and working to meet it because it's not personal. It's business." Okay, the policy heart of the Petersen agenda is means testing of Social Security, Medicare, and other vital government programs. The Concord Coalition, which Petersen co-founded, pioneered the idea of means testing Social Security benefits and reducing them for anyone making $40,000 per year or more. Gee, I want the gourmet cat food. No, you can't have the gourmet cat food. You are spending too much, you insolent, greedy old person. Voters forget that means testing is a slippery slope. Once it is applied to vital programs, it can be ratcheted down to until most Americans are excluded from them. Should we means test public high schools, elementary schools? I think, yeah, Petersen would like that. Don't give him the idea. Oh, good, he's dead. But his progeny lives on, and they're going to passionately continue. Petersen assembled a cast of characters to push his message. Ex-Senator Alan Simpson became a key spokesman, primarily because he shared Petersen's gift for making a heavily ideological agenda sound like blunt truth-telling. Erskine Bowles, David Walker, and a coterie of economic and policy consultants also filled the ranks. Let's not forget, the Petersen Foundation was a major funder, along with the Kochs, to get the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation up and running. And Petersen hated the Clintons, because when you need a foil, you got to stay with that foil. Yep. Okay, for the most part, the political tide has turned against Petersen, at least for now. His ideas are being shunned, at least publicly, by Democrats looking to capture the disaffected mood of struggling working-class Americans, a mood that cuts across lines of race, gender, and geography. Connor Lamb's recent congressional victory in Pennsylvania's 18th was embraced by the centrist Petersen-friendly crowd. But Lamb's campaign included both a hearty embrace of unions and an eloquent defense of Social Security. But the ghost of Pete Petersen still haunts the American political landscape. The truth is, it was haunting us years before his death. Petersen's family deserves our condolences, but Pete Petersen was not the profoundly good man mourned by Bill Clinton at his funeral, at least not for the rest of us. Petersen did great harm to people who were far more vulnerable than he ever was, and unfortunately his work lives on. But Pete Petersen does not sleep. But the rest of us need to wake up. Indeed we do. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today. But we will be back tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day. If there is any breaking news, our live feeds will pick it up. And if perchance something constitutional and major presents itself, we at Netroots Radio are prepared to go live. So stay tuned, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.